Hi, I'm Tom Lloyd. I served in the U.S. Army from 2002 through 2017. So I was born in Fort Myers, Florida in July of 1975, and my parents lived in South Punta Gorda at the time. I am named after my father, so I am the third, and my dad was Junior. My mom's name was Diane, my dad's name was Thomas. And so we lived in South Punta Gorda in Tropical Gulf Acres. I am a local person, I am a Florida native, and I ended up going to school here for a little while. I had two siblings, my middle brother Michael, who still lives here and is married, and he has 4 kids, so I have 3 nephews and 1 niece. And my youngest brother was living here. He had passed away a few years ago, but he has 3 boys and they live in Connecticut. Well, I didn't join the service until much later. I was 25 when I went in the military. Most people go in the military as young as 17 or 18. I wasn't really, I kind of was knowing what to expect, but I really didn't know what to expect. I was, at the time, like I said, I was 25 when I went in, and mostly the reason why I went in was because of 9/11. I was, watching the events of 9/11 at the time when I went to school here. I graduated from Charlotte High School in 1994. I was in the television production class all 4 years of my high school career. And then after I graduated, I got my first job at the Fox affiliate in Cape Coral, Fort Myers. And that's where I started. And then eventually later on, that led to being a photographer and things like that. And then again, the events of 9/11 happened, and that, I think, kind of really spurred me on saying, you know what, let me try and join the military. Yeah, so like most of us, we saw the events unfold right on our television screens. We were like, most of us, a lot of people were in shock. A lot of people kind of had an idea of what was going on. But a lot of us were very angry and upset. And again, prior to 9/11 happening, I had really contemplated and thought about going in prior to that happening. And I remember that day. I remember that day vividly. I remember being at my job. I worked here in the county. I remember my reporter coming in. I remember driving into work and hearing it on the radio saying that, at the time they were like, oh, a small plane hit one of the towers in New York at the World Trade Center. And I was like thinking, even a Cessna, I was like, how did they not see it? Like, how could they not see the tower? Like, I don't understand. It's huge. I'd seen the Twin Towers, earlier, several years ago when I was in New York. And so I was like, I don't understand how somebody could hit the tower. It's just weird. But then later on, not even 30 minutes later, then we hear another plane hit the other tower. And I was like, oh, hey, something's definitely going on. And I remember my reporter at the time, I remember we were talking and she, we were just watching all of it unfold as well in the newsroom. And I remember her turning to me, and I remember that's the first time I heard the name. And that's when she said, I bet it's Osama bin Laden. And I'm like, who? Like, who's this? Like, who is this guy? I've never heard of him before. And she's like, oh my gosh. And she was telling me all about it. And then, obviously everything happened. Funny thing about 9/11 though, as we all know, that President Bush was here in Sarasota at I think it's Emma E. Booker Elementary School, which is pretty much right on the county line between Sarasota and Manatee. It's up in that area. The events of 9/11 really solidified, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go in the military because this is my chance to serve, but also kind of at the time be like, yeah, I want to get some payback. I want to do that. And I think most people that are my age that made that decision, that's probably the same reason, is like, I wanted to come in because of 9/11 and because of what happened, and I wanted to try and make a difference and get back at those that what they did that gave us a black eye, so to speak. I want to do the same thing. And that's what basically happened. That was, I think, the kind of the driving force that pushed me to go in the military. And originally I was going to go into the United States Air Force. My wife at the time, I was already married, and my wife at the time, her entire family were retired Air Force. So I said, I'll go in the Air Force. So I went down to the local recruiter here in Port Charlotte and went into there to the Air Force, took their aptitude test, and they were like, wow, they're like, you scored really high. Have you ever thought about being a fighter pilot? And of course, you know, every guy's like, yeah, sure, I'd love to be a fighter pilot. I had better than 20/20 vision in both eyes at the time, and they were like, yeah, like your aptitude scores for a pilot were really high. And I was like, great. And they're like, but there was just one thing. And I was like, well, what's that? And they were like, well, at the time I was a lot heavier. I was a lot heavier weight. And they were like, we need you to lose like 90 pounds. And I was like, oh. And they're like, I'm like, when? They're like, in about 3 months. And I was like, oh, okay. And I shook their hand. I said, well, thank you very much. Let me take it into consideration. I walked out their door, made an abrupt right turn, and walked right into the Army recruiter's door. And they sat me down. I did all the stuff. And then again, like I said, I was heavy at the time. And so I still had like potentially like 3 months before they were going to, you know, decide whether I was going to go to basic training. So I started exercising. I had lost quite a bit amount of weight in the 3 months, not significant to 90 pounds, but had lost quite a bit, maybe like 35 or 40 pounds. And I ended up going into the military, which I really didn't think I would be able to get in because of height and weight. And, but I did, and it was quite a bit of a surprise. I had just taken a brand new job for another TV station in the area, and literally like 2 weeks later after I took the job, they were like, yeah, hey, you're going to be shipping off to basic training in March of 2002. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I had to tell them like, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't think I'd get in. But I ended up going in, and I left for basic training. I left Tampa in March of 2002. While I was at the MEP station, you know, they gave me a list of jobs, you know, potential jobs. And ironically, one of them was working for the Armed Forces Network in television. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm like, I've been in news for like the last 7 years. I want something totally different. They're like, well, what do you want? I said, give me something with computers and maybe a combat job, because I knew if you were in a combat role in the Army, you can get promoted quicker. And me coming in at 25, 26 years of age, you know, I was like, will I be able to take orders for somebody who's significantly younger than me? Like, you know, I don't know if I could have done something like that. But so I was looking for something where I can get promoted really quick. And then the recruiter there was like, oh, well, we can also, if you want to, we can add an additional thing on there for either jump school or air assault or something like that. And they're like, yeah, do you want jump school? And I'm like, what's that? And they're like, you know, parachuting, like parachutists out of planes. And I'm like, great, let me do something fun. Yeah, add that. So I ended up adding that on there. So I ended up going into the field artillery, MOS, and it was for a computer tactical data system. That it's a fancy term for it, but that's what I ended up going in for. And I left Tampa in March of 2002, and I went to the home of the field artillery, which is Fort Sill, Oklahoma, in Lawton, Oklahoma, and arrived at Oklahoma City Airport in the middle of the night. When I left Tampa, it was probably 75 degrees. I think I had a polo shirt and jeans on. And when I got to Oklahoma City, there was about 1.5 feet of snow, and it was like 32 degrees outside. So I got there. We got there late, like it was probably around, I'm guessing like 10:30, 11 o'clock-ish. And then we got on a bus. We had a 2-hour drive to Lawton. And I remember getting off the bus, and of course the drill sergeants are yelling already. The drill instructors are yelling, and you get off the bus and you go through the thing. By the time I think we actually got to bed the first night, it was probably close to like 2 o'clock in the morning. And we were up at like 5 in the morning, maybe 6-ish, something like that. And that's what started. And I was there for my basic training for the 9 weeks of basic training. While I was at basic, one of my drill sergeants put me in charge of the laundry facility. So we'd have to pack up everybody's laundry, and they would have to be thrown into a vehicle, and they were washed and they were brought back. So I had to keep a log of that. I did come in. When I came in as a regular E1 private. I had no rank. I was never a Boy Scout. I didn't have a college degree, so I didn't have an advanced promotion prior to coming in. And then I did like I said, my 9 weeks of basic training at Fort Sill. And then prior to graduating for basic, I was only one of, I think, 2 people in my whole platoon that was promoted. So I got promoted to E2. I got my, what we affectionately call our mosquito wings, is just one little stripe. And then I ended up going to my job school, which was also at Fort Sill. So I was what they call an OSIT. It's a one-station unit training. So I did my basic and my job school at Fort Sill. And so because, so I move over to the school side. So I get there, and it was overbooked at our school. And so we only had, they only had so many slots for the school. And there was 2 of us that were coming down for to go to the class, because what had happened is that if soldiers that went through basic training were either part of a state National Guard unit and they were there for basic, they actually had priority because the state was paying for them to be there. As a federal employee, as regular Army, you can stay there however long they want you to, till you finish. So I had to give up my slot to a National Guard person. So but there was only one spot available. So it came down to me and a fellow classmate that I graduated with. And our drill sergeant said, well, whoever is going to get the slot, you've got your choice. You can either do it for push-ups, whoever could do the most push-ups, or you could play rock, paper, scissors. And I already knew how this other soldier friend of mine was at push-ups, and I knew he wasn't good. So to give him a fighting chance, I played rock, paper, scissors, and I lost. So I ended up having to wait an additional 2 weeks before I started my job school, that was kind of interesting. Back when they used to have what they call KP duty, which was kitchen police. Basically, you worked from sunup to sundown in the kitchen, and it was horrible. It was horrible. And so I ended up doing that for 2 weeks. I ended up having to go, as crazy as it sounds, you used to also have to do, I can't remember what it was called. It was like S2 duty or S something duty, where basically you wore like a road guard, like a reflective vest, and you just have to go pick up trash along the side of the road. They don't do that anymore either, I don't believe. But it was 2 weeks of just busy work, so to speak, while you're waiting. But then I ended up going into the class, and I ended up getting the next one. And then, so basically everybody that I had graduated with from basic training, by the time I got into my school, they'd already been halfway through their school. So by the time, a couple weeks later, they were already off and heading out to wherever they were going, and I was still stuck. So, but I ended up finishing. And then I remember my very first, from job school, the very first night, I was only, at the time, there was a lot of things going on, and you used to be able to like go off post. Like this was your first time off post in regular clothing, and you could spend the weekend, like you got a pass for the overnight. And there was a lot of things going on at the time with like other classes below us. And so then the commander is like, nope, like you know, if you're gonna go through this board, and I'm gonna come through and do an inspection, and I'm gonna inspect all the classes. And if you met the standard and you exceed the standard and you get this, then you would be allowed to go off post for the weekend. And it wasn't just given like it used to be. And so I was like, oh gosh. And so I ended up going in front of the commander, and I was, out of my entire class, I think I was like one of like 3 of us, I think, that actually got a weekend off post overnight pass out in the city. And I remember like, it was crazy. This was my first taste of freedom in like 3.5 months, maybe 3.5 months, 4 months almost. And yeah, so it was nice. And then again, like I said, after I got done with my job school, I ended up leaving, and then I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. And that's the home of the infantry, but that's also where airborne school is. And so I went to jump school, and that was very interesting. I thought I ran a lot. Yeah. Now, you run every day, and you had to run every morning for our physical training, and you had to stay in a cohesive, form. And if you had fallen back far enough, there was an instructor who was far back from the pack, and if he passed you, you had to stop, and you had to stand off the road, and they would come by every morning and take the names down of whoever fell out of the run. And if you fell out of 2 runs, you were out. You were packing. You weren't going to be airborne. Your orders were going to be changed, and you were going to go do something else. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And yeah, I made it a point to stay in those runs, and I loved running. And I remember a couple friends of mine who I came with from Fort Bragg. They didn't even meet, unfortunately, they didn't even meet the minimum qualifications to become airborne, even though they were sent there. So they had to have all their stuff changed. But it was very nice because one of the higher NCOs that were in charge of them actually let my friends come over to see me graduate. So it was very nice. My wife came up at the time. My youngest brother, who passed away, came up at the time, and then both my parents came up at the time. And then they were taking me back. I was leaving. I was going back. I came home here to Port Charlotte for a couple of weeks for hometown recruitment with the local recruiter station here. And then I left in, I believe it was late September. And again, like I said, if I was going to go all out in the military, I was going to go all out. So I decided to enlist at my first duty station, which was with the prestigious 82nd Airborne Division. And so I ended up going to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I got there. It was raining. It was cold. And I got there, but it was raining. And I remember going into the new people's barracks and I remember getting there, and I remember the smell, like it was very musty. It was an old building. And then, I remember getting up and they were like, all right, so you're going to take a physical training test. And I'm like, all right, let's do this. Not preparing for the hills of North Carolina. And so I ended up passing my I passed my push-ups and my sit-ups, but I missed passing my run by like seconds. And I was like, are you serious? And I felt so bad. And it got even worse because the division, the 82nd Airborne Division Sergeant Major, Command Sergeant Major, he's the highest enlisted person there. He oversees all of the physical fitness tests for the people coming in. And I remember if you didn't pass, you had to stay after, and the Sergeant Major was going to talk to you. Needless to say, because I was lower enlisted at the time, my slap on the wrist wasn't as bad as if you were a non-commissioned officer, like an actual sergeant or above, coming there and you failed your PT test. That talk was a little bit different, and we could hear it from inside outside. But my first assignment, I was assigned to the headquarters and service battery of 1st Battalion 319th Airborne Field Artillery Regiment, the Loyalty Battalion. I remember getting there, I got to my unit, but my unit, most of them were already deployed. They were in Afghanistan for Operation Enduring Freedom. They had already been there for like maybe 4 or 5 months prior to me showing up. So I got there and I got acclimated to the unit, was doing things with the unit, and then eventually the rest of the unit came back. We intermingled, and then we just, we did training, we did PT, we did training, we did PT. That's basically what we did every single day.
And what is training for that position?
So that position, so basically what I do at the time, the unit that I was with 82nd Airborne, they're a field artillery unit. And when you think of field artillery, normally most people think of cannons, and that's what it was. But there's different cannons. So we had the small cannons. Affectionately, they were called the pop guns. But they were 105 millimeter howitzer. So it was a 105 millimeter round. And my job, I was affectionately called the brains of the field artillery. So we were the Fire Direction Center, the FDC. We were the ones that we would tell our cannons where to shoot. So I had been trained in my schooling to do manual gunnery, which is you have a map, a topographical map. You have this big, huge, what we call an RDP. It's a range deflection protractor. It's like a big ruler with a big arc on it, and you can do range and then deflection of where the cannon is positioned. And so we used to affectionately call that RDP the Klingon battle axe, because it literally looked like a Klingon battle axe from Star Trek. And then we would do that, and we would have all like how to draw icons on a map, plot a map, how to do everything. And then we also had the computer, which was Field Artillery Tactical Data System, or Automated Field Artillery Tactical Data System, AFATADS. And basically it was a computer version of the map. And so it could run multiple calculations faster than you could manually do it sometimes. But those that have practiced enough, you can actually beat the computer manually. But that's basically what we would do. So we would calculate all of that. We calculate how high the cannon need to be on the azimuth, how the elevation, the range from the cannon to the target, the deflection, like the side, and all that calculation was taken into consider, also along with meteorological data. We would get data because as you're shooting around higher, the wind is different and the pressure is different. So that could push the round for drift or whatever. It was a lot of calculation. It was a lot of math, but a lot of stuff was done on the computer. And I was really good at the computer. I was good at manual too, but I was really excelled at the computer quickly, being able to do it on the computer. And that's what we did. So our training would be, hey guys, we're gonna go out to the field out in the middle of the woods for about 2 weeks, and we're just gonna conduct training exercises. And that's what we would do. And then we come back and then we would, a lot of our time, especially as a combat arms job, it's not like we were, a nurse, or we were an engineer, or we were an electronic, like like electronics or whatever. It wasn't like a daily job. Like you would have to show up to like either the hospital or the clinic or this or that. We were a combat job. And what that meant is you don't do your job until you go to war. So it's like, what do you do all day? So like we would go and service our vehicles. And then our sergeant would be like, all right, well, go back to your rooms up in the barracks. And if I need you, I'll come get you. And then, we go up there and play video games or sleep, or whatnot. And then, oh, hey, we got to do this at this time. Or, hey, we got to do that. Or we're going to go to the range and shoot weapons, like qualify on our M4s or M9s or whatever. And then you come back and then, oh, hey, we're going to go do this, tomorrow. Okay, great. You just never knew what it was going to be. But most of the time, it was a lot of downtime because you were there. Or because you're airborne, you had to remain in a qualified jump status. That means you had to be ready to go. So if you did not jump every 3 months, you were on unqualified, and then you'd have to go through some type of course to get requalified. So I remember jumping all the time. Like I remember a manifest would come out and be like, hey, who wants to jump? Oh, okay, yeah, I'll do it, And I just remember jumping and jumping and jumping and jumping and jumping and jumping. In the 3 years that I was with the 82nd, I had performed close to about 32 jumps total out of various different aircraft. You train in a C-130 Hercules, which is a prop plane. Most of the planes, though, at Fort Bragg, because Pope Air Force Base is attached to Fort Bragg, we jumped out of I think it's a C4. It's got a ramp on the back, and you go up inside of it and you sit down, and you could put 64 soldiers on one side and 64 soldiers on another side. So what is that? 128 total people, and then you jump out. And most of our jumps were at night. We did have a couple what they call fun jumps. Those were like on special days, like on Jump Week during 82nd's birthday. They would have what they call Fun Week. And you would get on probably like a Black Hawk helicopter, and they'd take you up about 1,200 feet, and then you literally just scoot yourself up and push yourself off, and you fall straight down, and then your chute opens. Those ones had toggles. Most of the time when we jumped, we didn't. We had slips. You had 2 slips in the back, 2 slips in the front. You had to judge which way the wind was coming, pull the slips down, drop your weapons and your rucksack that were hanging, and it drops down below you, and then you hit the ground. I remember in training, you perform 5 jumps in training. You jump what they call Hollywood style, which is just your reserve pack in the front and your main pack in the back. No weapon, no backpack or rucksack or whatever. And then that's a combat jump. When you're jumping combat, you have all your gear on, like you have all your gear with you, and you have a lowering line, and you lower your gear down. It goes down this line to the end, so that hits the ground first before you hit. So when you hear your weapon and your rucksack hit, in approximately about 2 to 3 seconds, you're going to hit the ground. You don't know what to expect. I'm going to tell you that right now. Jump school was crazy. It was very intense, very physical. But when you jump your first time, you don't know what to expect. There's a lot of people that freeze at the door, But I just remember handing off. I remember jumping out. I remember doing all the stuff, looking up, checking, make sure there's no holes in my canopy, and then coming down. And I'm like going down. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'm gonna hit. And then I hit, and I remember just like sitting up, and I remember going, wow, that was crazy. And then I remember the drill instructor looking, or the sergeant airborne looking at me going, what are you supposed to do, soldier? Or what are you supposed to do, airborne? And then I was like, oh yeah. And then I roll over and pretended like I faked, like rolled over, and then popped everything like I needed to do, because I was just in shock, like, oh my God. And you don't know what to expect. You don't, like, your first jump, you land like a cotton ball. After that, you land like a ton of bricks because you know what to expect, and it hurts every single time. You hit, you hit, you hit. Parachutes nowadays, I think, are totally different at the 82nd Airborne Division. I think I jumped in with T-10 Charlies or T-10 Deltas. I can't remember what the name of the chutes were. It's one of those two variations. I don't even know which one they're on now. I have no idea. But yeah, after that, yeah, you hit like a ton of bricks every time because you know what to expect. And yeah, we did. We had a couple accidents during training. What they call leapfrogging. So when you have a lot of people coming out, so you know, it's a parachute. So if a person is here hanging and another person's here, this person is going to steal this person's air, and you can literally watch the canopy collapse, and then they drop and it opens, and then this one slowly drop and that one opens, and then it just goes down, and what they call leapfrogging. Sometimes you get twisted up, and so there's different techniques that they teach you on how to overcome that. Water landings, landing in power lines, landing in trees, things like that. Fortunately, I didn't have to have any of those. Fortunately, nothing really bad ever happened. But we did have some accidents during training, and even in training and you know, on active duty, they have accidents from time to time. But yeah. Or we'd go, like I said, we'd go out to the woods. We'd be practicing. Learning how to drive with night vision goggles was interesting. We did a lot of training, And again, like I said, my unit was deployed when I got there. Guys came back, and that would have been probably around October, November time frame is when we started really training for something. Or like I said, our unit got back, and probably around October, November of 2002, we really started training, because as you know, in April of 2003 is when we invaded Iraq because of what they did with Kuwait. And so that's when we knew, okay, this is what we're training for. We're training for Iraq. And I remember when it happened in April 2003, when the attack started, I was like, okay, yeah, we're getting close. We're getting close. And so the initial Iraq war started, Operation Iraqi Freedom started in April 2003. July. In 4 months later is when I arrived in Kuwait. We arrived in Kuwait in August, maybe end of July, beginning of August. And then we started in Kuwait. We eventually, you know, figured out where we were going. And you gotta remember, at the time, none of our vehicles had armor. So it was pretty interesting. We ended up driving from Kuwait up to where we were at, and they were like, okay, we're gonna be taking over this compound. It's called MEK, and we do know that it used to be a school, like a college, and it's just a little bit west of Baghdad. And we're like, all right, you know. And I remember driving. I was the commander's driver at the time, so I drove my captain for our battery. And I remember going through, you know, coming up to where, you know, the intersections are, and I remember seeing Baghdad this way, and we ended up going this way. And then, you know, I was like, oh, where are we going? And they were like, yeah, they're like, we're going to this compound. There's like what we affectionately call the cloverleaf, but it's basically like the interstate, and it's got like, if you're looking at it from the top down, it looks like a cloverleaf, but it's the actual interstate. So you have like round, like where you can get off and make turns and go, but it looks like a cloverleaf from the air. And the compound was off of the cloverleaf. But if you went across the way to the left, that was a town. And it's a town that everybody knows now, but at the time we didn't really know much. It was called Al-Fallujah. And so we had the MEK compound, and then there was another compound north of us, which was another forward operating base, or FOB, was called Dreamland, and that's where the infantry were located. So we had our fire base down here, and we had our infantry to the north who we supported. And we got there, we had basically had nothing. We had to start from scratch. We had to, build everything up, and we had to do everything. And yeah, so it was very interesting. Iraq is an interesting country. There's beautiful parts, and then there's parts that seem to go on forever. And it's just sand as far as the eye can see, and rock, but there are some beautiful parts of Iraq. There are some very beautiful parts of Iraq. All right, so my most vivid memory, I remember coming into Kuwait City. It was at night. I remember coming into Kuwait City. I remember plane coming up, taxiing. They roll the thing up. The doors open up, and we all are starting to get off. And as soon as I get out of the front, the door from the plane, I remember breathing in, and I remember like going, "What's this grittiness? Like it's gritty." And I'm like, "What is that?" And apparently it's because of all the dust from the sand and everything. That's what it is. It's dust. And I was like, "Oh, okay. Like, all right, whatever. I guess I can get used to that." But it's like grittiness. And then eventually, like I said, we ended up going, and it was crazy too, because it was like, we were in Kuwait, we were by the Persian Gulf. It was warm, but it wasn't crazy, But I do remember, like, the very next day, like, the sun was like out to kill you. It was insane. But yeah, and then of course up in Iraq and in Fallujah, it was the same way. It was, there was mostly were hot days, but I wouldn't know most of that because I worked at night. I worked from 6 at night till 6 in the morning. I was a battalion level fire direction specialist. And then I remember, like I said, I got there in August of 2003, so I was part of phase 2. And October 1 is when I actually got promoted in country. I went from being a private first class to an E4 specialist. I do also remember that I was the only lower enlisted soldier in my section where when I worked at night, I didn't have an NCO supervisor. It was just myself and a battle captain, a commander, a captain, and then probably a lieutenant or another NCO in our security or safety area. And I ended up doing that. I guess maybe to toot my own horn, because I was so good on the computer that my senior leadership said that I didn't need help. I didn't need because there was a commander that was there. So then I felt very honored that I was able to do that. So yeah.
Well, what was the best part of your service experience?
Oh, by far the people, the guys that were around me, the ones that were to my left and to my right. You get to know a lot of people in the military, and you get to know them very well because you're training together, you're living together, you're working together. That's the one thing that I really do miss, is just the camaraderie. Well, my service ended, that was active duty. So I served with the 82nd Airborne for 3 years, from 2002 to 2005. And I got out of active duty. I was actually going to re-enlist. At that time, I was separated from my ex-wife at the time. We did have I have one child with her, my daughter, my oldest daughter. But I was separated, so I was living in the barracks. I was deciding on whether or not to re-enlist. and stay active duty, but I didn't. I ended up not. I had then, at the time, had met my current wife, and I decided, yeah, I'm just not going to stay active duty. And where she was living, they had a U.S. Army Reserve, like the actual Army Reserve unit by where she lived, and I was like, oh, I'll just join them. So I got out of active duty in January 2005 because of all of my terminal leave that I had saved up, and then went into that unit, which was actually, it was interesting. It was a drill sergeant unit. It was an infantry unit where you were training to become a reserve drill instructor. And so I was with them for about 18 months. So I was working in a civilian career. Interestingly enough, it was in insurance. I was a licensed insurance agent in North Carolina. And then I was, in the Army Reserve, still performing my duties in the Army Reserve. But then, of course, this would have been 2005, right around just before the housing crash and the recession and everything like that. And then that was when people started losing jobs. People started getting laid off. And I was one of them. I ended up getting laid off from the insurance agent that I was working for. And my wife at the time, she was working. We had gotten married since then. So we got married in June of 2005. And so by when was it? Yeah, shortly after that is when I ended up, getting laid off. And I was like, I told the unit, I said, well, I'm thinking about moving back home to Florida because I gotta find something because I can't find anything here. And I was like, I'm gonna move back to Florida because that's where I know people and people know me. And so my wife was saying, yeah, let's do that. And then that's what I ended up doing. So I ended up leaving and I came to Florida. And then I ended up getting a job here for a little bit, and then eventually got back into news and found a place. My wife ended up moving here, and then I ended up going into the Florida Army National Guard here after I moved here. My mother and her husband, my stepfather had been in the Florida Guard for his entire career. And so he's like, yeah, hey, we have a field artillery unit right here in Arcadia, Florida. Like it's not cannons, but it's rockets, but you're already trained in it. So why don't you just go there? And I was like, okay. He's like, yeah, I know a lot of people. So I ended up talking to the recruiter. We got the ball rolling, and I showed up and I ended up being there. And then I got promoted. It was about 3 years to the date in October 1 also. Of 2008, I was promoted to E5. I was promoted to sergeant, so I became an NCO. And I was with that unit with, it was 3rd Battalion, 116th Field Artillery Regiment here in the state of Florida. They're out of Plant City, Florida. I was in Alpha Battery. And first it was in Arcadia, and then we got moved to the headquarters in Plant City in 2014, I think it was. And I was with them until December of 2017 when I was discharged from the military because of medical reasons. And so my total career in the military was a total of 16 years in the military. So I had 2 deployments. I had one with the 82nd in 2003. Somehow I dodged the bullet the rest of the time. And I deployed with Alpha Battery, 3rd of the 116th. We deployed in, we left in, February of 2013. We left to deploy as a security force to the country of Qatar. We ran operations for a compound in Qatar. So we manned like entry points, OPs, observation positions around this compound, and provided security inside and outside and roving and things like that. And I was there from February of 2013 until, when was it? December of 2013. And then we were back in Florida by January. So we had left Florida. We went to Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and we trained there, then flew from there to Qatar, and then flew back to Camp Shelby. We demobilized there, and then came back to Florida and was back home January of 2014. So yeah, and the whole time that I was gone, my wife, my current wife, my wife Daisy, we've been married, well, next Friday will be 20 years. And we have 2 boys. My oldest is 17. He'll be a senior next year. My youngest is 10. And then, of course, my daughter is 24 from my previous marriage. But when I was deployed, she's originally from Central America. She's Costa Rican. And when I was gone, she ended up going to Costa Rica for the 9 months that I was gone. My oldest son ended up going there too, and actually did his entire kindergarten in a foreign country. And yeah, so it was pretty interesting, but she was gone the whole time, so I knew she was safe. She was with family. And we still talked. We talked pretty much every single day. It was different than my first deployment. My first deployment was 2003. The internet was in its infancy. I remember having an internet cafe. I remember having the old, big, huge webcams, and you had to dial up, and you used to have calling cards to make phone calls, and but a lot had changed since then for my 2013 deployment. So I was able to do FaceTiming and all that other stuff. But yeah, Qatar was very interesting, and we had a lot more liberty in Qatar. Like, we could actually go out into the town and wear regular clothes, and we had a 3-beer limit every day that we were not on duty on the compound. Our compound had a Chili's on it. Our compound had a swimming pool. So we had a lot better conditions than when I was deployed in 2003. Because we didn't have anything. The service changed me. I appreciate the little things more. The creature comforts, the little things. When you're stuck out there and you don't have anything, being able to, like, I remember in Iraq, when we got there, we didn't even have showers. We had no showers. We had to either make our own showers. I remember the first time that they got a trailer in that was a shower trailer with actual hot water. Like, I remember being able to take, it was like, I mean, of course we took showers because we had our own that we created, but it wasn't the same. But I remember getting that nice, hot, cleanliness shower, and it was like, oh my God, I felt like I scraped off all of the dust because I was all itchy afterwards, because it was like actually having like a good shower. It's the little things that you miss them or you remember the most. It's just the little things. But it's also taught me, like, the military's also taught me discipline. The military's taught me organization. But the one thing that the military's also taught me is that people come from all walks of life. People are different races, different ages, different generations. They brought up differently, but we all came together to do our job, to get it done. And we all were happy together. Like, there's a lot of division going on right now in the United States, and we see that. But go into any military unit and you'll find the cohesion. You'll see people talking and acting together and working together, and they're not worried about who they like politically. They're there to do a job, and they do their job. the stuff that the military's taught me, I mean, it's helped me out because I'm able to like see the big picture, you know. If I'm giving a task to do, I look at the end result. Like, this is what this person wants done. Now, how am I going to get there? And so the one thing that the military's really taught me, and especially since I became an NCO, a non-commissioned officer, is I used to have to back time everything. And it used to be like, okay, to get to this point, this needs to be done, this needs to be done, this needs to be done, this needs to be done. And how to do that, how long is that going to take me? So then I have to back time, like, okay, if this needs to be done by 9 o'clock, then I got to do this by 8:30, I got to do this by 8 o'clock, this has to be done by 7:30, or so on and so forth. So whatever those tasks are to get done, you have to learn how to budget your time and do what you need to do, step by step. The military's also afforded me a lot of different things too. Being able to come back and finish schooling. You know, I mean, for those that, you know, are paying out of their own pocket, I feel for you. I really do. The military paid for all of my education. They actually paid me to go to school, which was interesting, which was an added bonus that I didn't even know until I actually started to. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to pay you to go to school. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah. And so, you know, I encourage those, if you want to, don't go in the military because you want them to pay for your education. Go in the military for the right reasons. But that's just an added benefit. It's an added bonus. Well, my message would be that we'll probably always have a military. Whether you decide you want to serve or not, that's your option. I decided to serve for the reasons why I told you, which was because of 9/11. I did go in with the mentality of, yeah, we're going to go in and we're going to slap people around and we're going to do this and we're going to do that because of what they did to us. But my attitude changed over time, because while some of those people did that to us, not everybody in that country is like that. You know, I knew that firsthand. In 2013, when I was deployed, I did have a medical incident that happened during a physical fitness test where I blacked out. I passed out in the middle of running. Next thing I know, I wake up and I'm in an ambulance on my way to the hospital in downtown Qatar. And I was at the hospital for probably, I think, a week. Originally, they thought I had a heart attack, but I didn't. They didn't know really what it was. But while I was there in the hospital, and of course, you know, Qatar is a Middle Eastern country, so there's different places, there's different people there. I mean, when I was there, literally right outside our gate, across the street, up in one of the corners, that was the office for the Al-Qaeda recruitment. The Taliban had an office right there. I mean, so they could see into our compound every day. So there was different walks of life there too in that country. And I remember being in the room, and I remember there was an older lady next to me, and her daughter was there. And this lady's, you know, her daughter's in the full outfit, you know, head covering. She wasn't in a full burqa where you just saw just the eyes, but she was covered and had the traditional, you know, outfit on. And she did speak a little bit of English, but I remember that people were coming around in the hospital and they were bringing food to all the patients. And I remember them going past me, and they delivered all the food, and I didn't have any food. And I remember the lady like talking in Arabic, and I think it was in one of the languages. It was Arabic or Farsi or something like that. But I remember her talking, and I remember during my training I could pull out some words, but she was talking to one of the nurses, And basically she came over to me and she's like, I told them that that was wrong. They weren't going to give you food. And I was like, what? And she goes, yeah, they weren't going to give you any food. And I thought that that was just plain wrong and blah, 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 blah. And so it's like, you know, not everybody is like that. Not everybody in that country is out to, like, you know, view America and kill an American. Like, it's not all like that. So I you know, you saw the kindness of people in that area, and mostly everybody in that area was very, very kind people. Beautiful country. Oh my gosh, there was so much to do in Qatar. And it's interesting too, because I got to see the national stadium, because they just had the FIFA World Cup there, and they had already had everything already built 10 years prior to and they were already advertising for it. But yeah, it was very interesting, very interesting. But I guess for those that that are going to see this message, I guess my biggest takeaway is join the military for the right reasons. Don't join just because you want to, you know, for the medical. Don't join just so they can pay for your education. You know, join because you want to make a difference for this country, but be a representative of this country that people are going to see. Yeah, you're going to be there with a weapon and things like that, but you need to represent who you are as a person in here, and that will show out there. Oh, what do I wish? We're loud. Most of us are loud. Again, remember, I was in field artillery, so my hearing is not the greatest. So I do tend to speak very loud. But that comes with training. That comes with training, because I have to speak up a little bit louder. My wife will tell you that I'm a little too loud. But for veterans, I would say you would have to be a veteran to know a veteran. You would have to have been where we've been to understand how we are. You know, a lot of people have gone through a lot more than I have. A lot of people have gone, you know, to places where they've gone normal and they've come back totally different. They've come back missing things. They've come back burned. They've come back shot. They've come back this and that. And don't get me wrong, there's been plenty of times during like in Iraq and everything else. I mean, we got shot at every single day. We got rocketed, mortared, everything every single day. I thank God every day that I'm still able to walk here because of the things that have happened in Iraq. But there's many that have come back totally different. So I would say you would have had to walk in our shoes to know how we are. Well, I mean, the military is designed for one thing. The military was designed to win wars. Okay, if you're not going to, like, if you're going in the military, that's why I said don't go in the military for the wrong reasons. Okay, when it comes down to it, no matter what your job is in the military, if all heck was to break loose, they're going to hand you a weapon and say, here, go do your job, because everybody is trained as an infantry soldier in basic training. That's what you're trained, no matter what your job is. That's your first job, is being a soldier and shooting. So that's what everybody's trained in. So don't go in for the wrong reasons, because even like with this generation, you'll find the people that are like me and like Larry and the other ones that decided to go in for the right reasons, and they knew what they were getting themselves into, right? But if you're going in because, oh, I'm going to go in because I want to do this and I want them to pay off my education, or I want to do this because I want this. Like, I've had these conversations before with other people, and mostly it deals with, the more hotter topics of, like, gays in the military, transgenders, things like that. I've had these conversations. If that's why you're going into the military, then you're going in for the wrong reason. The military is not an equal opportunity employer, no matter how much you want to think they are. They're not. They kick people out for being flat-footed. They kick people out for... When you go to MEPS, when you go to the military entry processing station, they are looking to find a reason to not let you enlist. There is a reason why people that join the military or get in the military, we're part of, what is it, the 3% club. I mean, only 3% of the American population can get into the military because of whatever reason. So they kick people out for whatever reason. They're not an equal opportunity employer. So yeah, so that's one thing. So if you want to go in the military, like this next generation or the generations to come, you need to know what you're getting into. Because there's a tradition, there's a history, there's a reason why you should go up to a veteran and thank them for their service, because they are providing security for you and for your rights as a U.S. citizen. They're protecting you, no matter how much you want to think that they're not. But they are. Because if not, like if those in World War II said, if the United States said, yeah, you know what, forget about Pearl Harbor, we're just going to be on our own. I mean, I've talked to veterans before, they older veterans, and they said, yeah, if we did that, we'd probably all be speaking German right now. You know, or Japanese, because Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, you never know, you know. So if you're, you know, it's not like, you know, Call of Duty video games, it's real life. You know, I used to have younger soldiers that came in with that mentality, and they'd be like, yeah, I'm ready to go to war, let's go. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll see. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, when you hear the bullets cracking over your ear, we'll see how you're like. When you're getting shot at as opposed to shooting back, we'll see how you're like. Because it's not like video games. So, I mean, that's all I can really say is, like, you know, to the younger generation, learn the history, and if that's what you still want to do, and you have it in your heart to serve your country, do it. Because I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat if I could.